is Hard Parking, brought to you by Right Honda and Right Toyota out of Scottsdale, Arizona. I'm your host, Jhae Pfenning, recording from my home studio in Gilbert, Arizona. How did you guys like that throwback intro? That was the intro that I ran for a long time. I was missing it because let's be honest, that intro of my old NSX sounds so much better than the current one I use, but the current one I use is my current NSX. So if you're relatively new to the show, aka you've been listening for only this year, that was the intro that I ran for quite a few years. That was my old car. Coming up on today's show, Tuah, Hailey Welch is in some kind of trouble. A local influencer was arrested, local as in here in Arizona, and I think he should go away for a very long time. A woman was arrested at Target for driving around while drinking wine. I get into a shouting match with my wife. Do Christmas lights belong on cars? As well as more car news. And I will get to some of your questions. So this episode and next week's episode will be the last two of the year. I decided not to do classic episodes this time around. I'm going to give you guys the full thing, all that and more after this word from 4Wheel Online. For over a decade, 4Wheel Online has been bringing the best truck accessories and truck parts to enhance the appearance and performance of all trucks and SUVs. They are dedicated to providing an extensive range of upgrades that will match any maker model on the road. The truck products cover everything to give your truck a custom look and added functionality. Need a wheel and tire package? Head over and use the configuration tool. They carry all the major brands of wheels and tires, so go get outfitted today. Visit them online at 4Wheel Online. Well, as many of you may have seen, James Gunn's Superman trailer has recently released within the past week. A lot of controversy. Of course, it's hard moving away from our prior Superman. Many of us feel like he's the best one ever, but maybe that could be as a result of just because he's what we know now in the superhero era. But there's nobody better to talk to about this than my dear friend, co-host One Drink Wednesday, has his own successful podcast. Of course, you guys know Wes Tankersley is a huge DC fan, huge Superman guy. Girls used to think he looked like Superman. I don't think he looks like Superman. I think he just looks like Wes. But Wes, welcome back. It's been a while since you've been officially on the show.
Yeah, man, it's good to be back on again. It has been a while. I feel like it's that, hey, Jay, can I be on your show? I'm not going to do that. It's when you ask me.
Stop it. So this thing came out, and I'd asked you about it, and I said, just reserve your opinion. We're going to do it on the show. We haven't been on in a while. So Wes Tankersley, what are your thoughts on James Gunn's Superman so far based on the trailer?
You know, right off the bat, like one of the coolest things that I thought, James Gunn always has good music, right? So like they've changed the tone of the Superman theme song. It's still the same theme song, but it sounds a little different.
I noticed that.
And that's something that kind of caught my eye at first. I almost thought it was like Top Gun for a minute, but I'm excited to kind of see where this goes because, I'm 44, and this is the fourth Superman that I have seen. Well, fourth on the big screen,
right.
There's all those other little small shows,
etc.
Yeah. So it's been interesting to kind of just see where this was going. There was a lot of stuff that came out at first where like the outfits and stuff were going to look like crap and this and that. And it looks like they just were wearing some loose fitting suits or something. They tightened them up with CGI, but I'm interested. I think it's going to be good. I wasn't so sure about it when Gunn got a hold of it because of Peacemaker, because, like Gunn's like more comedy, it feels like, with him.
Dark comedy too.
Yeah.
Right. Guardians of the Galaxy, fun comedy. Peacemaker and Suicide Squad, very dark comedy.
Yeah. And so it's hard to because who is Superman, right? Like he's this guy who is just like the epitome of what a person should be, right? I really liked Brandon Routh as Superman Returns. So I kind of thought he would be the guy. And then they brought in Cavill, and it was just like, it's a completely different feeling with Cavill. And now we've got this different guy. So I'm interested to see what he does. I like looking at him, he kind of looks like Superman, but like the Clark Kent version to me just looks kind of odd. Him with the glasses and his hair is like super curly. They overdid the little curl on his face or on his, the little curl that comes down, like
the iconic Superman curl.
Yeah.
Is he Jewish? He's got
this guy?
He's got the Jew perm.
Yeah. Right. They should have put the sideburns on there,
Yeah.
But I mean, it's kind of cool. It's interesting. I didn't think that, I knew they were going to have Crypto in there, which Crypto is Superman's dog, right?
Okay, so that's a thing. Because I was wondering when I saw the trailer, I go, what? I go, this has got to be, he wouldn't deviate. This has got to be comic accurate or something accurate, because it's not in every Superman universe, right?
No.
We probably never see Krypto unless you're a diehard fan like you are.
Yeah, and it's weird because, like, there's Superman and Lois came out last year, which is kind of the WB thing with Tyler Hoechlin playing Superman, which is really good. If you haven't watched that, and I think you should do that on your reaction channel, I think you'd enjoy it. But it was just different to see. Like, they had different versions of these things. Like, they have Superboys. Like, Superman in one universe has kids, right? And he's got the two that they're twins, and they both have superpowers. So it's kind of crazy to just see all these different things that can happen with Superman. But there's a lot of like comic book stuff that either I don't know about or I've learned over time, and it's just kind of cool to see it all unwind.
So looking at this trailer, I'm looking at him doing and interacting with a lot of different beings, and so this doesn't seem like it's the same story. And I think that's what Man of Steel was so good at, is we all know the story. So they told the story in a series of flashbacks, like very meaningful flashbacks, very impactful flashbacks, which is what I loved about Man of Steel. I mean, I loved that movie because of that. And then this one, it looks like he's right. They probably fast track it a little bit, but it sounds like he's right in the middle of some well-known existing conflict. Were you able to pull all the different characters out?
There's a couple, and I can't remember the names of them because they've all been kind of in different iterations. Like the Green Lantern's in there, but it's a different Green Lantern. It's not the one that we're used to.
Yeah, the Nathan Phil, whatever his face is casted. He looks goofy as shit. Do you think that's on purpose?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm gonna have to look up that Lantern because he has like that weird bowl cut, and his outfit just seems
he looks dumb as hell.
Yeah, exactly.
And for the listeners, so we all know Green Lantern is the one character, and of course people know Ryan Reynolds as Green Lantern. What I think that movie's a little I think it's a little too much hate. Sure, they way overused CGI, but the movie as itself I don't think was bad. But just for reference, there's tons of lanterns.
Yep. Hal Jordan is the one that Ryan Reynolds plays.
Right.
And I can't remember the name of this guy, but it's one that's not common.
Yeah. I got to tell you, I wasn't hypercritical of the casting because they're going to make it work. And, when we see people outside of their characters on the red carpet of fame or whatnot, a lot of times they don't look anything like the person they're playing in any given show or movie. So I wasn't critical of that. Yeah. But when I saw it, I go, wow, he actually looks, and of course the curl, right? And it seems like you could almost plug anybody in as long as they have specific facial features and you build a story around them. And anybody, to your point, because of all the different Supermen that you watch, almost anybody feels like they could play Clark Kent and Superman if the story is written correctly.
Right.
And so I think it looks, the difference between him and Clark Kent, although it's the same person, is like a completely different person, which I think is great because obviously back in the Christopher Reeve day, you're like, that's Superman with glasses.
That's how, like, the Superman and Lois, it was kind of funny because I saw the scene the other day where the kids find out that their dad is Superman. And it was hilarious because he just took off his glasses and then all of a sudden the kids were like, oh.
Right.
It's like never seen him before. You've never seen your dad with glasses on?
That's funny.
There is a little bit of variance, I feel like, with the way that he looks as Clark Kent versus Superman, which it might be a little bit tougher to figure that out in that sense. But yeah, it's going to be interesting. I got Brandon Routh flash when I see there's like this part in the scene where he's sitting down at his desk and he turns around and he looks at Lois, and I got that like kind of bewildered look that you get from Clark Kent, like you did Christopher Reeve and stuff, like where they kind of dumb him down a bit and make him seem like he's pretty nerdy. Yeah.
So. He was a klutz, if I recall correctly.
Yeah.
He was like the world's biggest klutz. But anyway, I just wanted to get your opinion on that. I think it's super cool. I was unsure watching the trailer if it's going to be that interesting to me, but I'm pretty sure I'm going to go watch it just because it's a James Gunn thing.
At the end of the day, it's Superman, dude. Everyone loves Superman. And there may be those diehard comic book people who just don't like the story because they could have done it better, or that's not comic book accurate, but that's really tough to do.
Those are the worst people, by the way.
They are. Like, this to me is like, when Henry Cavill was cast as Superman, I was a little bent out of shape because I really like Brandon Routh. So you get kind of in love with the person who plays Superman, and then all of a sudden they put someone else in there. So I think if it says Superman in it, I'm probably going to like it no matter what, but it'll be cool to see the difference.
Well, good deal, man. Thanks for joining. We're not doing a One Drink Wednesday this week. I think we decided we're not going to do that. So
yeah.
Obviously I talk to you every day anyway, but just so the listeners know, I'm not completely, big time in you here. Which have a Merry Christmas this week.
Yeah. Yeah, you too. It'll be a good one.
Charles Smith, 27 of Arizona, was arrested recently for going to Wal-Mart, where he's known for doing pranks. Wolfie Coletti on TikTok is what he goes by, over 300,000 followers. This steaming pile of shit was going to Walmart, grabbed some bug spray, some insecticide, went over and sprayed it on the vegetables, sprayed it on the bananas, the rest of the fruit, filmed it, thought it was cool. This was on December 19th. He was arrested. He's an influencer. These are pranks, but are these really pranks? These are bullshit pranks. What do you guys think should happen to this guy? After that, another video surfaced where he went to a laundromat and he went over to a guy's dryer after he put his clothes in there, waited for the guy to leave, opened it up, put in bacon and a dozen eggs in with this guy's clothes, shut the door, and continued the dryer cycle. Is that a prank or is that something else? What do you think should happen to Charles Smith? I think he should go to jail for a long time. This isn't a slap on the hand. It takes a special type of sick person to do something like that. Hailey Welch, Miss Tuah, has found herself in the middle of a major controversy. There's a lawsuit filed. So she had a meme coin that came out, and people were dumb enough to buy it. That's how crypto works. Sometimes you're just dumb and you buy dumb shit. $500 million or close to it, and now she's being sued. At the end of the day, do you really think she set this up? Or maybe she was talked into it by another company. They screwed her over. They screwed her investors over. The story is developing. So, Tuah, all for a girl who said just spit on the thing. Boy, she's gotten famous. Is she the most famous person out of nobody in 2024? I'm in her corner. I want her to succeed because it's just crazy to me how someone can succeed off of something so damn stupid. Good for her. But I hope she gets out of this jam because she's probably not the real person behind it. And everybody's getting screwed. A few days ago, a post was going around about a woman who was arrested. Florida woman has been accused of driving a motorized shopping cart through Target while drinking wine from a bottle and eating sushi and cinnamon rolls. I decided before I posted this on my social media that I better look it up. And guess what? It's according to Fox 4, but the strikingly just good-looking girl in this mugshot. Apparently, she's actually somebody famous. I don't know. I don't really know all these people. But I looked it up, and this exact story is false. However, in 2015, Jocelyn Lopez, according to the Citrus County Sheriff's Office, was in fact arrested for driving or riding a cart through Walmart instead of Target. Walmart while having sushi and wine. This is USA Today. Again, this is December 28th of 2015. So it's true. Now, Jocelyn Lopez does not look nearly as good as this other woman, the fake story. According to this story, Jocelyn shot up meth and decided to go through the store and eat the food and drive around and drink the drinks. So make sure you check your sources because the story, the more bizarre, the more likely it's not real. But if you find it and can cross-verify it, then talk about it and spread it because this is bizarre. It's kind of funny, except for the meth. Of course, I said in the opening that I got in a shouting match with my wife. That's going to come up a little bit later. But first, let's get into some car news. On the end of the last episode, while doing the car news, I was talking about Costco. You guys remember? And I had asked if anybody's bought a car at Costco, or maybe I was just being a little crazy. Well, come to find out, Yasu, supporter of the show, over in Japan. What's up, Yasu? Have a Merry Christmas. He emailed and said that his mom has purchased 2 cars through Costco before in the past. So I'm going to paraphrase what Yasu said here. He said it was years ago, but over the course of those years, they were both great deals. He loves Costco. The first time his mother ordered a BMW, and the second time she ordered an Audi. They both came from the same dealership, but it was both through Costco. But he also added that your Costco membership works worldwide. Now, I knew that I could go to Costco somewhere else in the country, but Yasu says you can go to Costco anywhere in the world and get in as long as you have an active membership. So that's pretty cool. If you've been thinking about buying an Acura NSX, sort of like the one that I used to own, the 1991 through 2005 model, you may have to sell your house to do so. These things have been going for crazy amounts of money on bearing a trailer. Recently, they've kind of gone up, gone down, gone up, gone down. But so far, there's been back-to-back examples of the '02 to '05 silver NSXs. Most recently, a 2,000-mile, that's right, a car with 2,000 miles on the odometer. A 2005 2,000-mile Acura NSX went for $315,000. I think I know why. When that color first came out, Silverstone, it wasn't a very popular color. I think the one that went for over 200,000 a few weeks ago only had 10,000 miles on it. People just don't drive that car. But it makes you wonder now, if you own an NSX, do you want to drive it? Or do you want to just park it and turn it in for money? One of the purest driving experiences you're ever going to have. Mine was a 97. It had the '02 to '05 headlights, but it was actually a 97, which should have had the pop-ups. In the NSX world, in the car world, a lot of people prefer the pop-up headlights, but it looks like it doesn't matter. People just want an NSX and they're willing to pay, depending on what it is, over $300,000 for a first-gen NSX. The Toyota GR Supra, mostly known as the A90, other people call it the MK5. They're done making that car. It received a lot of hate when it first came out. If you guys remember, if you've listened to this podcast long enough, when they announced the Supra, that a lot of people were upset about it because it didn't look like the Toyota FT1 concept. Why would it? That concept looks sick. I said, there's no way that thing is coming out for less than $150,000. So they gave you the Supra, and people were mad because it looked like the Temu version of the FT1 concept. So we've been here long enough to see that car make it to market, and now it's officially done. The final edition has a revised 3.0-liter turbocharged inline six, 429 horsepower, 420 pound-foot of torque. Pretty impressive. Just like I said before, these cars, they don't look bad at all. All you have to do is slightly modify them, throw some wheels, suspension, maybe a body kit. You're going to forget that you used to hate this car. These cars are good. You may have seen them out there if you're not a car person. Like, hey, what is that? Well, that's the Supra. It's a great looking car. And this podcast has been around long enough to see it get introduced to the market and now leave the market. Some stats: key performance, 0 to 60 in under 4 seconds with a top speed of 167.7 miles an hour. 0 to 60 under 4 seconds is really fast for something that's not considered a high-end sports car or an exotic sports car. That is booking it. Take Tesla aside and the EV cars aside, because that's just a whole different animal. For instance, my old NSX, 0 to 60 on average 4.5 to 4.8 seconds. This thing is much faster than an old NSX with the same 3.0 liter. In fact, mine had a 3.2 liter. This is 3.0 liter. So it's amazing what they can do with vehicles these days. I raced one of these things on the road, if you guys remember, maybe last year. It was a local one, modified. That thing was fast. And it's a great looking car. So hats off to the Toyota A90 Supra / MK5 Supra, and we'll see what else Toyota comes up with. There have been rumors of a new Celica, so we'll have to wait and see. The C8 ZR1, every time I think of Corvette, I think of Drew Bunkley, supporter of the show, because you guys know he's our resident Corvette guy. I guess I could have and should have called him to do this part, but the C8 ZR1 has recorded a 0 to 60 time of 2.3 seconds, which is faster, as it says in the article, than a Bugatti Chiron, I never know how to say it. If you guys look at the Bugatti, Chiron. But here's the deal. Sure, it may be faster than the Bugatti. It may cost a fraction of what the Bugatti costs. But if I don't have to pay for anything but gas, I, along with any normal person, is going to take the Bugatti all day, every day. It's kind of like when people modify their cars. You have an old clapped out car and you go, wow, this thing has an LS whatever swap. And I race Lamborghinis and Ferraris all day down the freeway and I whoop their ass. It's like, all right, cool, man. That's cool. That's cool, man. I get it. Which one am I taking my wife out on a date? Which one am I taking to Cars and Coffee? Chances are the one I'm not taking to the drag strip. Not to say the ZR1 is a clapped out car by any means. That's pretty impressive. We haven't even seen the Zora yet. Maybe when they announce the Zora, we'll get Drew Bunkley back on. So also on the last episode, I mentioned the fact that Nissan and Infiniti is in a lot of financial trouble. Well, now it's come out that there's talks, Honda is in talks with Nissan on a possible merger, bailout. There's not a lot of information out there. I know that the company Foxconn, which makes Apple iPhones, was interested in possibly acquiring Nissan. I still don't know what this really means. I have my thoughts are, what would this benefit Honda to merge with Nissan? Like, where's the benefit there? Honda's not struggling, Nissan's struggling. Honda makes better cars, better motors. My thought is that this is going to be more of a bailout where Honda buys a majority stake, but it still stays Nissan. Don't know what's going to happen to the Infinity line. I thought Mitsubishi was long gone, but Mitsubishi's still around. So that means that, Mitsubishi is a shadow of what it once was, but it's still around. Maybe that's what happens in Nissan. Maybe that's what happens to Infinity. Does it go to the way of Datsun? You guys remember Datsun? I'm thinking that Honda just bails them out. You know, like how Ford, Google this. Google how many companies Ford owns, how many automakers Ford owns actually, or they have a majority stake in, and it might surprise the hell out of you. Ford has their hands in literally everything. I'm surprised Ford isn't trying to acquire Nissan. And finally, do Christmas lights belong on cars? Of course they do, but is it legal? Did some research on this last week. I wanted to talk about it last week. I didn't get around to it last week, and so I'm talking to you about it this week, just before Christmas. So in many states, it is illegal to drive around with Christmas lights on your car. Police say, local authorities say it's because they don't want people getting confused between that and emergency vehicles. I hear that and I scratch my head because obviously if there's a fire, the fire truck isn't going to look like a Prius with Christmas lights on it. It's going to be this big thing screaming down the highway. But did you know that fire trucks aren't always red? The ones here in Gilbert are white. That's right. But I'm getting away from it. So I looked it up, and half the states it's illegal. Half the states don't care. Most police don't care anyway. What kind of cop would you be if you pulled somebody over? Now, if it was distracting, that's one thing. So if you're driving around and your car is just full of Christmas lights and it's a strobe effect and you're blinding people, that's one thing. But most Christmas lights are very low voltage and they're not going to do anything. Here in Arizona, you can have a citation for doing it. But a local news company, Phoenix 4 or whatever, did a story. I found it on YouTube and actually watched it and I go, oh, okay. There's a local kid getting a lot of praise about it. But I've seen it. When I did the toy drive a couple weeks ago, there was a Mustang that pulled up and the hood was done in Christmas lights. Which, by the way, if you're going to do it, do it. Don't do it on part of your car. It looks stupid. Just do the whole car or don't do it at all. I thought about doing it on the Honda Z. Actually, I wouldn't have done the whole thing. So never mind about that being stupid. I'm going to leave that in the podcast because I deserve it. But I thought about doing it with a little car, but that freaking battery dies if you look at the car wrong. I can't imagine what will happen if I hooked up Christmas lights to it, which makes me wonder, how do you get the lights on and off? You have to have them hooked up to maybe a battery inside the car because you would think, right, well, the car, you just hook it up to the car battery, but the voltage has to be different. And so you could blow your lights. Like the lights have to be designed to handle that current or voltage. Well, I guess what I'm trying to say, not to get too technical. So you can't just plug it into your car, but there's got to be something. Maybe it goes into the cigarette lighter. Maybe you get some sort of an adapter, a 2-prong to cigarette lighter adapter or something and just plug it into your car. I don't know, but it's not illegal. So when you see it, take pictures of it, send them in. It looks cool or dumb, depending on the car. But Merry Christmas to those guys. And that is the car news. So I'd mentioned in the opening, I got into a shouting match with my wife, and it was pretty bad. I mean, that we weren't really angry at each other for too long, but it was over, guys, guess what? It was over politics, sort of, but not really. I think that we have to take a step back and, like, I'm really good at trying to separate the artist from the action in a sense. Like you could say R. Kelly made great music. R. Kelly is a piece of shit. Like both of those things can be true. Regardless of what you think about Michael Jackson, his music is of legend. Now, I don't forgive those other things, but I can separate those things. You could dislike somebody for who it is you think that they are as a person, and they could also be really good at doing something else, or they could be the best person for another job or a task. Two things can be true at the same time. And for a lot of you, that's not the case. But I try to think and move through life believing that two things can be true at the same time, even if they're opposite things. I brought up the ABC settling and agreeing to pay the Trump campaign or the Trump library $15 million for defamation. The defamation came on the heels of a conversation that the ABC anchor, or whatever you call him, George Stephanopoulos, I think that's how you say his last name, a conversation he had with. So the lawsuit stemmed from back in March. George was interviewing Nancy Mace, Congresswoman Nancy Mace, and he repeatedly was saying that Donald Trump was guilty of rape, found guilty of rape. The actual jury found him guilty of sexual abuse, which isn't the same thing as rape. And so they're both really shitty. Okay. But the point was, and my point was, if you're going to be someone in the news, representing the news, you have to be as down the middle as possible. Now, either they pay you to do these things or you choose to do these things for your ratings, but you have to be held responsible for these things that you say, in which my wife agreed. So we thought that was done. And I said, look, it's okay if you think Donald Trump is a piece of crap. It's okay if you think he's sexist, misogynistic, whatever. But you can't go around calling him a rapist if he wasn't convicted of rape. You just can't. You can say it's my opinion that he did it, but you can't go around as saying it as a statement of fact, especially if you're representing a major news company and your job is to be a news reporter, a news anchor. You can't say things that aren't true. I don't know if you guys have seen on The View, and I don't watch The View. I hate The View. But on X, people will post where the hosts of The View will say something, and now they come back from commercial break and they have to read what's called a legal note, which means somebody's watching that and saying, you just said this. That is factually incorrect. This is the correct thing. So this is what you're going to read, or we're going to sue your ass for defamation. And so they come back from commercial and they read the correction. They may say, well, this person, no charges were actually filed. It's important. It's important. And we're not talking about Trump anymore. We're just talking about whatever it is the case. I could say, Jhae Pfenning, all he does is he's had 5 instances of just ramming other cars with his car because he thinks their cars are so much cooler and Jhae he can't live with that. So there's 5 instances where he's rammed somebody else's car. Come back from commercial break. Well, those 5 instances, no charges were ever filed by the police or the other parties. So there was obviously more stuff going on. Now, Jhae may have hit those cars, but no charges were filed. So we can't say that Jhae is a reckless driver, and if he doesn't like you or your car, he's going to ram into you. We can't legally say that. We have a responsibility to try to tell the truth. And so from that conversation with this $15 million lawsuit, or this $15 million settlement, you guys have to remember, ABC agreed to pay it, which means they didn't want to go to court. Because if you go to court, all the cards are on the deck, and you have to talk about things that you may not want to disclose, and it could open them up to a whole bunch of other things that was unintentional, which is not a good look. And so we went from that to the January 6th thing. No, I'm going to tell you guys, hopefully you're still listening. I don't care for Donald Trump. I don't like him. I don't dislike him. I don't care. Okay, because I understand that I can draw that line. And I've told you guys this. I always, when I get curious about something, I try to search for the truth. And I don't know if everything I find is the truth, but I search long and hard enough to where I have enough information, not only through what people are telling me, but what I'm independently trying to find as well. If you are into sports and you know your stuff, I'm sidestep here, and you tell me that the records show, although LeBron James has more career points than anybody in the history of the NBA, through advanced analytics, Michael Jordan is better in these 8 statistical categories, which actually matter, I'm going to believe you because I know that's what you know. I'm not just going to blindly believe if some random person walks up off the street and tells me that. I'm going to go like, I'm going to look that up. I need to cross-reference that because I'm not sure if that's true or not. And at the end of the day, I find out that it's true, or the information presented to me is more likely true than false. If there's 7 things, well, let's just go back to this January 6th thing. Many months ago, 4 or 5 months ago, because it was July 13th, when the first assassination attempt happened in Butler, Pennsylvania. And some of you people out there think that that was 100% staged by the Trump campaign. You're silly. I have no doubt that that was an inside job. I don't know who were pulling the strings. It could have been bipartisan. I don't know. Too much speculation. But don't you think it's weird we don't know anything about that yet? 5 months later. So I started digging into stuff. And I've talked about this a little bit on a previous episode. I was curious, like, holy crap, something's not right. How did this happen? And that led me down a bunch of rabbit holes of looking into things I otherwise didn't give 2 shits about. I don't care. So January 6th of 2021, when the insurrection happened, I saw it on the news. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, the insurrection is when all those people stormed the Capitol. Now you know what I'm talking about. I saw that on the news and I go, damn it. Everybody who stormed, my position has not changed on this. Everybody who stormed the Capitol, if you damaged anything, if you hurt another person, if you spray painted, broke, did anything other than walk in there, I don't think you should have walked in there. You deserve to be penalized, fined, jailed, depending on what it was. Everybody. So I've never changed my stance on that. In light of new information, I still don't change my stance on that. But a few months ago, I looked it up because I sit on X all the time. X is the new source of media, of truth, most of the truth. There's a lot of bullshit on X. I've said that before and I'll say it again. So you have to understand what you're looking at and you have to cross-reference things. Is this plausible that this is actually true? Or is this made up stuff? When you see an affidavit, is this a real affidavit? Is this made up? Now, one of you, I don't know if you're still listening to this, but I got a review that said they liked the show, except for when I talk about things that have already been disproven, like the ABC whistleblower thing. That was never disproven. There was a filing complaint to the commission that somebody at ABC received this information. So that's a real complaint. And what am I talking about? I'm talking about the Trump-Harris debate. Well, as Kamala Harris fed questions ahead of time, the whistleblower said not only was she fed questions ahead of time, but there was an agreement between her campaign and ABC to not ask certain things and to not fact check. So I don't know if that was true or not, but the road leads that was true. But I said it on the podcast, and I think I said at the time, this is what's happened. It's not a statement of fact. This is what's happened. So with regard to January 6th, I saw they had posted on X official transcripts of a conversation of Donald Trump on January 3rd that he had with General Milley saying, send the National Guard. There's going to be a peaceful protest. Send the National Guard. Send everybody you have to ensure it's a peaceful protest. And General Milley said, F that. I'm not going to do it. You guys can look this up. Google it. I'm not going to do it. I don't care what he says. I don't like the guy. And then Pelosi somehow got involved. And long story short, they didn't send anyone. And I've been saying this for months. I go, you know what? If President-elect Trump said he called, either he's lying or he's telling the truth. So if he's lying, he needs to go to jail like everybody else. If he's telling the truth, the people who covered it up need to go to jail or be held accountable. I've not changed my mind on that. I still feel that to this day. Well, lo and behold, the Biden campaign said, we're not going to release January 6th stuff in the January 6th committee, oversight committee on anything until after the election. Now those papers are starting to come out. Lo and behold, it's looking really bad. I've already spent way too much time on this, but the FBI had 3 people on payroll, 3 undercover people in that insurrection, 23 informants. Now you have 26 people there. Now, the FBI director, Chris Wray, is on record in front of Congress saying that they weren't there. So he lied to Congress because my wife's like, why would they lie? They testified. I go, no. They lie. It's been documented now that they've lied. They've destroyed evidence. Those people need to burn. I'm not trying to defend Donald Trump, but what I'm saying is, if he was telling the truth, does the truth not matter? Does the truth not matter? And people's hate for this guy is so deep, you don't care about the truth. You just want confirmation bias. News that confirms, it's called confirmation bias. You just want news that confirms the way you feel about him. And in light of new information, you don't care anymore. So I told my wife, you know what? You are so effing naive. Because every time I told her when it came to George and this $15 million thing, well, man, he's just doing that on his own. There's no proof that the news companies are in cahoots. I was like, oh my God. And then it comes to January 6th. Well, they already testified and, they can't go to court for it. And I go, yeah, but don't you think that if they were lying, they should be held accountable? Well, I mean, all that stuff is fake. Oh my God. So then I called her naive. And, oh, by the way, there's also video now of police officers in uniform leading these protesters through the Capitol. And in some cases, letting them in these side doors. Pretty crazy, right? Now it sounds like it was a setup the whole time. Like they knew what they were doing. There's another one out there where the officers walk the person to the main door or the main metal detector, handcuffed. They uncuff this person. They fist bump this person, AKA they know who this person is. Pretty sus. Let the person walk away. So I don't know exactly what happened on January 6th, but I know it's not what everyone thinks it is. And if people were lying, everybody from Pelosi, the J6 committee, which, by the way, Biden is trying to pardon. Why would you pardon somebody unless they did something wrong? Right? You have to ask yourself those questions. It has to make sense. So if one side says the other side's been lying the whole time and come to find out they were telling the truth, now when something else comes up, you're going to believe them a lot more than you were willing to believe the first time. Critical thinking. She told me I goes, you're so fucking naive. And she said, oh yeah? Well, you're fucking stupid. Because I listened to one podcast, All In podcast, and I decide all my opinions based on what they say. And because they say Trump's a good guy and he's good for the economy, I think he's a good guy and I've changed my stance on him. Never said he's a good guy. I listen to people who know more about shit than I do. And that information, that goes back to what I was saying earlier with Michael Jordan. That information is important. Again, I've talked about that podcast before. Those guys don't always get along and they don't always agree on things. In fact, they disagree on a lot of things. But when people who understand how the economy really works, they understand how money markets really work, when they tell you, and without dispute from anyone else, that our financial crisis, our deficit, that the United States is headed toward bankruptcy, so any change is good at this point, they know what they're talking about because they've done the research, they've done the work. They're not just the sky is falling. They're not just hyperbole. They're not those type of people. So when they tell me, when I listen to them and they give me information, I'm like, well, maybe it's not as crazy as people say it is. And all I would say about this whole Donald Trump thing that's going to happen in January 20th when he gets inaugurated, and I've said this on this podcast before, history is going to tell us if anyone was any good or not. The president doesn't tell you if it's good or not. So depending on what happens this next couple of years, we're going to find out, was this a good election to put Trump and his team? I elected his team, not him, his team in. Was it a good idea or was it catastrophic? But the road that we were going down was already catastrophic. We were already headed toward the dead end. So now we're trying to fix that. There's nowhere to go but up. It can't get any worse, can it? Short of World War III. So that's what our big argument was about. And we haven't talked about it since then. I think we stopped talking to each other for maybe 2 hours. Got over it. But I guess my point in all that is it can be both things. You can dislike somebody and maybe they're the right answer if they bring the right things with them and the right support structure with them. Maybe they're the right answer. Or maybe they're not. You can like somebody and they could be terrible for the job. You can dislike somebody and they could be great for the job. History will tell you if they're good or not. Today doesn't tell you anything. Coming up, a little bit of Q&A. Okay, as promised, before we finish this episode, and if you're still listening, thank you. I know I go on some of those rants, and some of you aren't prepared to listen to that, but it's coming, that's how I feel. It's from my heart, and I'm very passionate about those things without trying to alienate people. So I received about 20 questions. I think there's 19 here, and don't worry, I'm not going to go through all of them, but the ones that I don't answer now, I'm going to answer next week, the last episode of 2024. I had to push back because what happens is I ask you guys to ask questions and you don't really submit questions, or one or two people will submit a bunch of questions and it's like they're just reaching. And there's a few of these half-assed questions here, but there's some really, really good questions that people asked. And so I'm going to selectively answer some of them. It's kind of a rite of passage. If your question sucks so bad, I crumple up a piece of paper. It's the symbolism. Back when Jim Rome used to read fax questions, he'd read something, and if it sucked, he'd crumple it up. So some of you might get that. So I'm going to go through and answer these in no particular order. First off, Robert goes by Mexi Ricer, fellow NSX fam. Will DJ Jhae Pfenning make a comeback in 2025? So a lot of you don't know that I used to dabble in music. I love music, but what I used to do is I would go out there and I'd source a bunch of different tracks, pay for them. So I'd pay anywhere from $2. I think I paid as much as $6 for one song. And I would combine them and make mixed albums. And I have probably 11 of them out there. I used to have a SoundCloud. I no longer subscribe to SoundCloud. I've had a few other audio things out there. None of them were official. But I used to go through and make album covers and kind of distribute the music. And I have them in a zip file. If you're interested, let me know. heartparkingpodcast@gmail.com or reach out to me on social media. I have them in a zip file and you can download them, extract them, put them into your iTunes or whatever. And they should be seamless from song to song. But depending on how you listen to it, it might actually break it up, which is kind of annoying. But that used to be a kind of a hobby of mine. And I made them for me. I made them for you. And my wife and I still listen to them to this day, depending on what we're doing. So if I'm driving across the country, I might throw one of those on because it kind of breaks up just listening to podcasts or listening to whatever else is on the radio. But no, I don't have any plans to do it again. I was recently at a charity event, a friend of mine, actually Grace, Becoming Grace Foundation, and they had a DJ there, and he was playing some stuff that I was really grooving to, some Above and Beyond, Arjuna Beats, stuff like that. Because I had 3 of them on the Chill Pills. It was what I would call them, the Chill Pill series. It was basically the coffee house chill music. And I was feeling inspired to, maybe I should get back into it. But I don't think so. That's just something I've put behind. I think the last one I did was maybe in 2015 or 2016. And I still listen to that album today. Good question. Jay Built says, dude, we need to do a bourbon trail trip to a distillery. We do. I'm down. I found out that Jay's really big into bourbon. He's so big into bourbon. He's telling me where some of the releases are. He's like, hey, if you go into the shop and the guy's really cool, if you spend $7,000 in his shop, then he's going to sell you this $6,000 bottle of bourbon for $2,000 because he's making his money. I'm like, yeah, that sounds awesome, man. I'm never going to pay that much for bourbon, but I realize there's people out there who this is what they like to do. They like to collect. They like to trade in some senses, and sometimes they like to resell. You know, Chase, one of my good friends, Chase, that's what he does. He buys and he resells. So if there's something I want, I either go out and try to find it locally, or if I'm feeling lazy, I just call him up and say, hey man, do you have this? How much? I'll buy it from you. Ship it to me. But Jay's other question is, having owned both NSXs, so my 1997 Acura NSX and my 2022 Acura NSX, which would you still choose and why? Well, I wouldn't take one over the other because I love them both the same. And I know that's kind of a cop-out answer, but I wanted the Acura NSX for so long. 20 years it took me to buy my first Acura NSX. 20 years. I bought it. I enjoyed it for 9 years. I did all sorts of things to it. Eventually, I wrapped it, as most of you know, listening to this podcast or just knowing me from social media. Wrapped it. It got pretty famous. And in 2020, I took the wrap off. I drove it for a year, sold it in December of 21, and bought my Type S in June of 22. Two completely different animals. Love them both. And I can't really pick one over the other. But all things equal, I would love to have an old NSX alongside my new NSX. Eddie Big Mad Puppy, Eddie Ramos, supporter of the show, says, "Will you buy me an R34? That's a Nissan Skyline R34. Buy yourself. Rebecca, who's also been on this podcast, excellent story. When I need to do an episode, sometimes I prop hers up as a kind of the best of. This is something that I saw her type and I read it and I was like, man, that's a deep question. And that question is, can you describe the current definition of the impact you were trying to achieve with your podcast? And I read it and I was like, damn it, that's a real question. That's a deep question. I thought about it. And then I came back to it later after I read it again. And the answer is simple. It's more simple than I ever could have imagined. What I want this podcast to do, and it's done it already with some people, and I wish I could find a way to get this podcast in front of more people, because I believe I offer something unique. I would like to provide people who either personally know me or are into the cars or care enough about cars, a place to go to where you can still get your car information, but you can also get people's opinions on society and culture, what's going on out there. Because the important thing for me on this podcast is to show you, the listener, that car people can talk about things outside of cars too. Hell, I just did a rant about politics earlier. You don't hear that when you're walking into a Cars and Coffee or going to a car show. It's really, hey man, what have you been up to? What new mods do you have? Maybe how's the fam? Here it's, okay, what do you think? What's your favorite bourbon? What do you think about what's going on in Washington? Things that normal people don't typically think about or care about, but when the time is appropriate, everybody needs to have some sort of opinion. You might hear what my opinion is on George Floyd. I'll tell you my opinion on George Floyd because there's people out there that may want to know my opinion and the opinions of my guests about George Floyd, because we are real people at the end of the day. And I want to provide a place for people who like to hear all that kind of stuff, kind of a breakaway from the norm, a refreshing, different take on a podcast. But I encourage you, if you listen to this podcast, also listen to other podcasts, because if you like cars, you're not going to get that much car stuff here. You're going to get very casual cars here. I'm not going to go through the list of the 15 best cars. Well, actually, I have done that before, but that's what I want to do. That's what I want to achieve. That's the impact part of it. I just recently made a big purchase that I've been looking at doing for the last 5 years. And I will announce that once I get all the paperwork done, once I get everything 100% solidified. It's been something I've been trying to do, and I think it's going to help me take this to the next level. I'm excited for it. Last one I'm going to do for this episode, and there's a bunch of other ones I haven't answered yet, and there's some really good ones. Last one for this episode is from Eric Hill, a friend of mine down in Texas. He says, what acquaintance, friend, or guest in the entirety of your life has influenced you the most, and how? Well, the entirety of my life, that's hard, because we go through so many different facets of our lives. The more stuff that you experience in life, the more your life is going to change. I know that doesn't make any sense, and I don't want to sound like Kamala Harris here. But whatever influenced me when I was 10 years old through 20 years old may have been completely different from my 20s and 30s, my 30s and 40s, and my 40s and beyond. So I'm going to answer this in a podcast way. And this may not be the way this question was intended, but it's the way I'm going to answer. From a podcast perspective, I used to listen to Jim Rome all the time. I listen to Howard Stern driving into work before he went on satellite radio. Same deal with Jim Rome too. When he went to satellite radio, I stopped listening to him. Listen to Dan Le Batard with Stugatz. Those three podcasts. Oh, also cannot forget, I don't know why, Adam Carolla. He's become more of a political piece these days lately. I guess we all are, right? Even Stephen A. Smith is sounding off on politics. Those 4 podcasters inspired me to be the podcaster that I am today. And they inspired in different ways. The biggest thing with Jim Rome was have a take, don't suck. I usually don't call people out and talk a lot of shit and be so matter of fact about it like Jim Rome. But at the same time, when things are ridiculous, I double down and I find myself talking like Jim Rome might have talked. He's still around. He's still a great guy. I just don't listen to him that much anymore. When it comes to Adam Carolla, there's certain things, and Wes Tankersley, who was on the show earlier, he listens to Adam even more than I do now. But Adam Carolla was one of my podcast idols when I really decided I wanted to do this. And he's been on the show once. I've had him on here once, and I posted that before. Listening to him talk about different things kind of gave me the courage to do the same thing. You know, when this podcast first started, when I had Brando on here, it would be, this is our podcast. Hey, Brando, what are you working on this week? This is what I'm working on this week. And we kind of had, I wouldn't say it's a scripted podcast, but like with any show, typically, if you have a guest and you want to talk about things, you want to give them a heads up. Hey, we're going to talk about the new Toyota Supra. You know, which person in social media are you excited about this week? Who do you want to give a shout out to? So we didn't know what we were going to say when it comes to that, but that's a topic and that's normal. And so when I listened to Adam Carolla's show, he would have like Dave Damashek come on every once in a while and do the sports, or he would do the Rotten Tomatoes game, which Wes and I do now all the time on One Drink Wednesday. It's become a main part of the show. So through this inspiration of these people, it helps shape how I do my show. One thing Adam said is, you can't do your podcast and worry about what people think about you. So for instance, and I do, it's easier said than done. I don't have the kind of success that I would like yet. But Adam Carolla would get on there and maybe he would talk shit about his kids or his wife or his ex-wife or some other relative. And it would get back to him eventually and they would get pissed, or they would get back to them and they would be pissed off about it. But you're kind of filtering your show. Completely honest with you guys, I do still filter what comes out of my mouth because I do not want certain things. I don't want to get in trouble for saying certain things about certain people. Those of you who talk to me on a regular basis know how I really feel about things. Now, I'm not going to lie to you when I'm doing the show. I'm going to tell you what I think. I'm just going to find less impactful ways to say it or just not say it at all. And then when it comes to Dan Le Batard, which is somebody else asked this question, and I don't think it's this week. I'll answer it next week. But the quick answer is he's one of the people that I would love. He's a dream guest. I still listen to Dan Le Batard now. I get a lot of my talking style from him. He does a sports show, but they used to call it the non-sports sports show. Get it? This is the non-automotive automotive podcast. Where do you think I got that from? I got that from him and his show. But he has a crew. He has producers, a co-host, and recurring guests. Sound familiar? That's something that I've always wanted. I want that family feeling of everyday talk. But they still talk about sports, but he also tackles real things going on in society. To the point to where people would say, stick to sports. Sound familiar? People tell me to stick to cars when I start talking about things outside of cars because apparently I don't know anything I don't know anything that I'm talking about. I know I have an opinion. I know I do a little research, and if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. But I guess through Adam Carolla and Dan Le Batard, it tells me this is my show. This is my show for you guys, and this is also your show. So we're going to talk about things that other car shows are never going to touch. And that's how they've influenced me to do this. That's the last question. Next week, I'm going to finish those questions. I'm done taking those questions, but there were some excellent ones, so I appreciate you guys. And half of you people who asked those questions are probably not going to listen to this episode. I will mention it on the Facebook page. I will mention it on the Instagram channel that I did answer half the questions, and it's up to you to figure out which questions of those that I decided to answer. And so with that being said, I want to thank Right Honda and Right Toyota, Toyota of Huntington Beach, Claremont Toyota, and Gardenia Honda, 4wheelonline.com, Cell Shop Wireless Services, AutoCannon officially licensed Honda and Accurate Gear, Patreon business supporters: Automotive Specialty Tuah of Owings Mills, Maryland; Kuya Automotive out of Winter Garden, Florida; Pell Construction out of Connery, Michigan; Big House Small Home Design out of Ashford, Virginia, and Traverse City, Michigan; Shaving Success with Wes Tankersley out of Boise, Idaho. If you're interested in supporting the show, patreon.com, Hard Parking Podcast. Special shout out to Mark Stoneman, Catherine Cox, Eddie Ramos, Richard Graves, Byron Jones, Bojung, Oskamina, Drew Bunkley, and Yasu Chiba. I got to tell you guys something, okay? The people who support this podcast have been supporting this podcast for years. So even if I don't have the type of success that I feel like this podcast deserves, I know that there's people out there that are rooting for me, and they have a financial interest in this podcast in making sure that I stay afloat. And so for that, I will forever be appreciative. And for those of you who don't do that, you still listen to the show, that's just as important, arguably more important. So you can follow me on Instagram at Jhae Pfenning, join the Hard Parking Violations Facebook group, join the Hard Parking channel on my Instagram. This year is almost over, and I will continue to say this: I cannot grow without you telling the world how great this show is. I cannot grow without you telling the world how great this show is. Let's do this. Let's grow this thing together. I will talk to you all next week. Let's go Texas Longhorns versus ASU. That's a tough one. I live in Arizona, but Texas is where my heart's at. We'll get Q back on here to finish talking about college football here in a week or two. Otherwise, have a Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, Happy Hanukkah, whatever the case is. Have a great time, and I will catch you on the other side of the holiday. And I will catch you on the other side of Christmas. And I will catch you on the other side of Christmas.
Shut up!